Hey, we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Jeremy, and let me tell you something. Nothing hits harder than realizing the life you thought you built was nothing but a lie. I've been working in construction for years to provide for my wife, Victoria, and our 3-year-old child. During my time at home, I noticed a shift in Victoria's behavior. Whenever I had a day off or got home earlier than expected, Victoria always seemed to find a reason to leave the house. It was something different each time: grocery shopping, meeting friends, or running errands for work. But what struck me the most was the urgency. She'd grab her keys and rush out as if the walls were closing in on her. At first, I tried to rationalize it. She did freelance work, so her schedule was flexible. Maybe she just preferred working outside the house. But the more I paid attention, the less sense it made. She wasn't meeting clients. Most of her work was remote. There were no serious deadlines that required her to be out so often. And even when she wasn't working, she always had an excuse to step out. The pattern became impossible to ignore. It made me wonder, if she was so restless when I was around, what was she doing when I wasn't? I started paying closer attention. Her quick trips would sometimes stretch for hours. When I'd ask her where she had been, her answers were always vague. And if I asked twice, she'd get irritated, like I was accusing her of something. That's when I knew something was off, and I had a feeling I wasn't going to like what I found. Instead of making a big deal out of it, I decided to test her. Because sometimes the best way to see someone's true nature is to give them an opportunity to reveal it. So one evening, I sat Victoria down and told her what should have been devastating news. I told her I lost my job. And if that wasn't bad enough, I told her a bad investment had wiped out our savings. No backup plan. No safety net. Nothing. Now in reality, our savings weren't gone. They weren't even in an account with my name on it. But she didn't know that. I wanted to see what my loving wife would do when she thought the man who provided for her suddenly had nothing left to give. And let me tell you, her reaction was cold. She had no concern and not even a moment of hesitation. She just looked at me and said, "And what do you want me to do about it?" There were no words of encouragement. No, "We'll figure this out together." I just sat there, stunned. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about herself. She started mumbling about how hard things would be for her and our 3-year-old child. Not a single question about how I was handling it. That was all I needed to know, and that was when everything changed. The moment she thought I was truly down, she stopped pretending altogether. She started talking to me like I was beneath her. I suddenly lost all value in her eyes. She would leave the house whenever she wanted, barely tell me where she was going, and would come back at odd hours without explanation. And when she was home, it was like I didn't even exist, unless, of course, she needed something for our 3-year-old. That was the only time she'd bother speaking to me. At first, I tested the waters. I told her that since I was out of work, we'd have to depend on the money she made from her freelance job to handle certain things in the house. The look on her face said everything. She didn't like the idea, not one bit. But what choice did she have? I was broke, and she was my wife, right? Sometimes she'd bring money. Other times she'd claim she had nothing. But I knew that was a lie, because she still managed to buy herself new clothes and get her hair done. And whenever she did contribute, it came with a price. She would nag endlessly, making it clear she resented every single dime she spent. Any little thing would set her off. If the house wasn't spotless, if our child was too playful, if I asked her something at the wrong time, she would lash out. It wasn't just at me, either. I noticed how she started getting irritated even with our child. Small things that never used to bother her suddenly made her snap. It was like the mere act of contributing to our household expenses made her feel like she was being wronged. That was when I knew for sure she never saw me as an equal partner in this marriage. In her mind, my only value was in how much I could provide. The moment she believed I couldn't do that anymore, she had no respect left for me. So I played along. I let her believe I was struggling. I didn't fight back. I let her show me exactly who she was when she thought I had nothing left to offer. And every single day, she made it clearer and clearer. She never loved me. She only loved what I could give her. Months later, after all the cold treatment, all the late nights out, and all the dismissive looks she had given me, Victoria sat me down one evening and casually told me, "I'm pregnant," she said. I barely had time to process those words before she followed up with a real dagger to the chest. "But it's not yours." She said it like it was nothing. She didn't even care about how I'd react. In her mind, she thought I was so desperate to keep the family together that I'd accept whatever she threw at me. But she was wrong. I just stared at her, letting the silence stretch between us. Then slowly I smirked. "That's funny." She frowned, confused about why I found it funny. That's when I reached into the drawer beside me, pulled out a plain, white envelope, and tossed it onto the table between us. "Open it," I said, leaning back. She obeyed, sliding the papers out. The moment her eyes landed on the test results, her entire demeanor changed. The color drained from her face, her confidence cracking for the first time. That was the paternity test for our 3-year-old child. "The results show he's not mine either." She stared at the paper, as if reading it again would change the words printed on it. I watched her mouth open and close, struggling to find something, anything, to say. But what could she say? She had been lying to me for years, and I just realized. I leaned forward, my voice calm, almost amused. "So let me get this straight. You thought you could tell me you're pregnant with another man's child, and I'd just accept it? Meanwhile, this entire time, you had me raising a kid that isn't even mine." She stammered, reaching for words, but I cut her off. "You know what's even funnier?" I said, standing up. "I already planned to leave. In less than a week, I'll be going overseas for a new construction deal my company secured." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm done with your bullshit. I was already making arrangements to leave before your confession." I slid my hands into my pockets and shrugged. "Now, you just made it easier for me, because you have been unfaithful, but being pregnant for another man is the biggest evidence ever." Panic flashed across her face. "Wait, what happens to me? What about our child?" She clutched the test results like they could somehow change reality. I let out a small chuckle. "Take a child to his real father. You're an adult. You'll figure yourself out." Her face crumbled as she realized, too late, that she had played herself in the worst possible way. The next morning, it all began, Victoria's desperate attempt to undo the damage. She must have stayed up all night thinking about how things had turned against her, because the moment I stepped out of the bedroom, she was already waiting. Her entire demeanor softened. The cold, distant wife I had endured for months was suddenly replaced by a woman who wanted to remind me how much history we had together. She smiled at me, asked if I wanted coffee, and even tried to reach for my hand, gestures that had been non-existent for a long time. I wasn't surprised. I knew she was calculating. The moment I revealed my plans, her mind must have immediately raced to what she could do next. I'm sure the idea of taking the legal route and trying to squeeze as much money out of me as possible had crossed her mind. But how long did she really have to pull that off? Even if she wanted to drag me to court, she'd have to find a lawyer willing to fight that battle. And that wasn't going to be cheap. And then there was the biggest problem for her. I was leaving the country. Who exactly was she going to play that game with? Even if, by some miracle, she found a way to come after me legally, what claim did she even have? The kids weren't mine. I had undeniable proof. There was no alimony to fight for, because the evidence of her infidelity was overwhelming. The way she had treated me, the way she completely abandoned the marriage the second she thought I was broke, that would be enough for any judge to see right through her. No, she had nothing. No leverage, no advantage, and no safety net. So at that moment, begging and trying to appeal to me was her best bet. And she was smart enough to know it. At first, I said nothing. I just observed. Because I already knew what this was. It wasn't regret, it wasn't love, it was fear. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing what I provided. She knows that her new baby daddy has no plans to stick around. So she turns back to the man she had disrespected, lied to, and cheated on for years. And now, she wanted to talk about us after hearing I might be getting some money. She brought up old memories, the vacations we took, the nights we spent talking about our future, the times I held her through life's struggles. She told me she made a mistake, that she let stress and emotions get the best of her, that our family was worth saving. But I had already seen through the act. If I had been jobless and struggling like she thought I was, would she be standing here suddenly affectionate? Of course not. She only cared now because she realized I had something valuable, an opportunity she didn't want to lose access to. She tried harder. At one point, she even broke down in tears, telling me she couldn't raise 2 kids alone, and that she needed me. But the truth was, she only needed my security, my money, my stability, not me. She had already made her choice, and now she was going to live with it. I had no intention of giving Victoria a chance to make my departure difficult. She thought she had a week left to convince me to stay, to manipulate me with nostalgia and empty promises. But in reality, my flight was only 2 days away. I had planned everything down to the last detail, documents secured, tickets booked, loose ends tied up. I wasn't about to let her desperation trap me in a life I no longer wanted. The night before my flight, I moved in silence. While Victoria lay fast asleep, completely unaware of what was coming, I packed my bags. I had already taken most of his important belongings little by little over the past few days, so there wasn't much left to gather. No goodbyes, no last words, no final arguments. Just a quiet, deliberate exit. I took one last look at the house, a place that was supposed to be a home, but now felt like a prison I was finally escaping. Then, without hesitation, I walked out the door, leaving behind a woman who had spent years lying to me. As the plane rumbled down the runway, the engines roared, the wheels lifted, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. I had been holding my breath for so long, pretending, enduring, staying silent. But now, as I watched the city shrink beneath me, I finally let out a slow, steady breath. I was free. Victoria had lied to me for years. She had humiliated me, disrespected me, and taken my presence for granted. And for months, I had to play along, acting like I was broken, like I had nowhere to go, like I had no future without her. But the truth was, she was the one who had no future without me. And now, that was her problem, not mine. I thought about her for a brief second, but there was nothing left in me to feel. I wasn't sitting here imagining what she was doing, or who she was calling, or how she was reacting to finding out I had left sooner than she thought. None of it mattered. She could cry, she could beg, she could scheme. I was already gone. I didn't hate her, I didn't wish her harm. I just didn't care. And that was the real victory. Indifference. I leaned back in my seat and looked out at the sky, the vastness of it, the new world ahead of me. No baggage, no weight dragging me down. Just me, moving forward. I wasn't just leaving Victoria behind. I was leaving behind the version of myself who once thought love meant sacrificing dignity. That man was gone, and I wasn't looking back. I know there are men out there stuck in the same situation I was in, feeling trapped in a marriage where they're nothing more than a paycheck, an afterthought, a man who's only acknowledged when it's convenient. If that's you, listen carefully. Don't argue. Don't beg. Don't waste your breath trying to get her to see your worth. A woman who doesn't respect you will never truly love you. And if she ever does come back around, it's not because she suddenly realized your value. It's because she realized she's losing her security. The biggest mistake a man can make is tying his entire existence to a woman who wouldn't hesitate to replace him the second things get rough. The moment Victoria believed I had no money, her true colors showed. That's when I learned the most important lesson. Love that only exists when you're useful isn't love at all. It's a transaction. And once you see it for what it is, you stop feeling the need to convince her to stay. So if you're in my shoes, stop trying. Instead, plan. Get your finances in order. Protect yourself. Move in silence. And when the time comes, don't make a scene. Just leave. No warnings, no emotional goodbyes. Because the second you show that you can live without her, that's when she'll suddenly want to fight for the marriage. But by then it won't matter. You'll already be gone. I didn't get revenge. I didn't need to. My freedom was the only victory I needed. And trust me, there's nothing sweeter than knowing you walked away with your dignity, while she's left with nothing but regret.